A Twist of Fate, Chapter 3. Trish turned anxiously to Stephanie as she fretted. I have a huge crush on him. Had it been any other person who had uttered those words, the woman known as the billion-dollar princess would have more likely than not tripped over her non-existent crack in the sidewalk and fallen rather unceremoniously onto her face. But Stephanie was no fool. And as soon as she sees Trish's initial reaction to Scott, she guessed something along the lines of what the blonde bombshell had just confessed. So instead of taking an unplanned and most certainly unwelcome dive into the asphalt, Stephanie simply asked, "What about Matt?" "I don't know," Trish fretted, toying around with a strand of sunlight. Like literally like sunlight? Whatever. I mean, I guess I still love Matt, but it's just that. We've been drifting apart recently, and he doesn't seem to care. However, I don't want to throw away an 8-month relationship over some stupid schoolgirl crush. Well, the important thing is to remember right now that you still have a crush on Scott. Stephanie spoke up wisely. I mean, let's face it. He's young, he's gorgeous, and... So what are you saying? Am I just a wannabe groupie or something? Trish demanded. Stephanie felt kicking herself in the choice of words. No, I didn't mean anything by that. She quickly apologized. Well, all I meant was you're feeling neglected by Matt, and then you run into the gorgeous guy who happens to be a rock star and who seems to care about you. It's only natural you get a bit smitten about him. Trish instinctively glanced down at the little Care Bear that she cuddled in her arms, and particularly at the comment about Scott caring about her. It's probably nothing to worry about, Stephanie continued dismissively, a confident smile on her face. I mean, Scott's nothing more than a celebrity crush. You know, like you're dating the wonderful guy, but you still have a stupid celebrity crush on. I don't know. Let's just say Tom Cruise. I guess you have a point there, Trish admitted reluctantly. Trust me, Stephanie spoke confidently. You just happen to meet your celebrity crush, that's all. After Backlash, Scott will be out of your life, and you can start mending your relationship with Matt. You're probably right, Trish admitted. By then, the two had reached Trish's rental car. The Canadian diva gave Stephanie a quick hug before getting in and strapping on her seatbelt. Safety's important. Thanks for listening to me, Steph, Trish said gratefully. I'll see you at the house. Show on Friday. Okay? Okay, bye. Stephanie waved cheerfully, watching as her friend started the engine and pull out of the parking lot. She sighed, before weaving through the sea of rental cars toward the one she was Hunter shared. God damn it. Outwardly, Stephanie had appeared to be a personification of confidence. She rarely gave advice to Trish on her relationship woes. Inside, however, the 25-year-old princess of wrestling was feeling less than self-assured about her words. What she failed to tell Trish was that all 3 members of Creed, and that included Scott Stapp, lived in Orlando, Florida, the same city Trish had just recently moved to. Oh God, no. Really? So it wasn't technically true that Trish would never see Scott again after the Backlash live show. Hell, for all she knew, Trish and Scott could end up being neighbors. Please, God, tell me this isn't true. Stephanie winced. Oh, that's not going to do wonders for the relationship with Matt Hardy. Yeah, because we refuse to say people's names in full, but okay, whatever. She murmured to herself. As her and Hunter's rental car finally came into view, it looked like the billion-dollar princess who had just handed out advice to another person a mere 5 minutes earlier was going to have to seek some advice of her own. Stephanie glanced cautiously behind her as she made her way into the women's locker room. Wasn't she just in the car, though? She had put an extra effort to make sure that Trish arrived at least a half an hour later than the rest of the divas, and it appeared as if her work had paid off. The blonde bombshell was nowhere in sight. Pulling up a chair and sitting down cross-legged, Stephanie suddenly popped a question which caught one of the divas by surprise. God, there's so many commas. So, she began using the tone of the voice most commonly found in the slumber party full of 13-year-old girls. Who would you rather date? A pro wrestler or a rock star? Most of the other divas stopped whatever it was they were doing to turn around and stare at their boss in surprise. The only person to speak up without hesitation was Lita, who said confidently, "Put down for the rock star." Without even bothering to look up where she was leaning, tying her shoelace. I think we need more details than that, Steph. Molly Holly murmured uncertainly after everyone had gotten to her share of gawking at Stephanie and Lita. Stephanie flicked a long chestnut lock away from her face as she wept on the other... She wept? On the other divas in the earnest blue gaze? Oh, whatever. Well, let's just say we have a popular WWF diva. We'll just call her Patricia, she began, internally wincing at the thin disguise she managed to spring on the real people's identities. What about Patricia? Lita demanded, sparing a brief glance at the two of the flock of women who had gathered around Stephanie who plowed on. Suppose she currently was dating a WWF superstar. We'll call him Matthew. This is the daughter of a billionaire. But whatever. By now she was getting used to the pathetic attempts of covering up the superstars' real identities. But lately, the two of them have been spending less and less time together. They're drifting apart, and Patricia's scared because Matthew either doesn't know it or just flat out doesn't care. Ouch. Molly looked sympathetic. Right, ouch. Stephanie agreed, nodding. Now let's just say here comes the sexy rock star. Sorry. Trying to put back the vomit here. We'll call him, Stephanie struggled to come up with a name that sounded like Scott, but she couldn't decide. Swipe another Creed member's name. We'll call him Mark, and Patricia's smitten by him. Uh-oh. Tori Wilson spoke up, beginning to see where the situation was headed. Now, Patricia's not sure whether Mark's romantically interested in her, but she knows that at the very least, he cares for her well-being, enough to buy her a get-well present after she went through a really brutal matchup, Stephanie said truthfully. Oh, how sweet. Stacy Keebler beamed, toying around with a strand of her long blonde hair. I know. It's totally adorable of him to do that, and now Patricia doesn't know whether she should break up with Matthew to pursue a relationship with Mark or forget about Mark and try to work things out with Matthew. Stephanie laid the problem out into the open. A stretch of silence followed, during which presumably the other divas took the time to think over the dilemma and come up with a plausible solution. I think she would go with Mark. Stacy was the first one to speak up. I mean, after all, obviously he cares more about her than actual boyfriend. So was very concerned enough to give her a get-well present and thought she was hurt while Matthew didn't do anything about it. God, why are these sentences so long? Yeah, but Mark's a rock star, Tori pointed out logically. You know, the kind of reputation they have. No, Stephanie hastened to assure. Mark's in a band most famous for having squeaky clean records, which comes into groupies late night partying and all that. Well, is Patricia happy with Matthew? Molly wanted to know. Because if there isn't even the tiniest chance that she can work things out with him, I don't think they would throw away her relationship to chase after a guy who might not even be romantically interested in her. Oh my God, this is people talking. She's got a point there, Tori nodded wisely. Or if you could turn out that Mark was just a celebrity crush and she threw away her relationship with Matthew over nothing. And, Molly added logically, both Patricia and Mark are in the entertainment business, which means they'll both be traveling a lot. With Matthew, at the very least, you can see him when they travel with the WWF together. But if Patricia decides to go with Mark, he's going to be touring in different states, and she will be on her own. With Matthew, they'll be able to... God, there should be a comma there. They'll be able to spend at least 2 or 3 days together per week. With Mark, who knows when they might go and see each other. Stephanie was nodding along. Maybe, she conceded. But... It had been 3 in the afternoon when Stephanie McMahon had called Trish Stratus on her cell phone to inform the Canadian diva that there had been a slight schedule change, and the house show would begin at 7:40 rather than 6 o'clock. She had cited some complicated reason along the lines of the Undertaker being unable to make it for the main event due to the leg that had been broken earlier in the morning. That he had been broken. Okay, and how they went about contracting Kurt Angle from nearby Pittsburgh to take Dead Man's place. And the American hero had just gotten out of traffic jam on the drive to the house show location in Philadelphia and would arrive at least a half an hour late. Naturally, Tricia had no reason to think otherwise and began making plans for at least one last trip to the gym. Then Matt and Jet Party had shown up into their hotel room door and asked if she wanted to hitch a ride in the arena with them, but that she would have a hurry up because there was already 10 minutes tardy. Trish had blinked in surprise and reminded them that the house had supposedly been delayed for 30 minutes. With 2 blank stares met her response, she repeated Stephanie's complicated story, to which both her boyfriend and her brother had burst out laughing. Only until they had propelled her up with the groom and towards the rental car did Trish finally realize that there was no half-hour delay. Ticker and his leg were perfectly fine, and Kurt Angle was at home, relaxing with his wife. At the time, she had no reason to suspect a hoax on Stephanie's part. She assumed the youngest McMahon had gotten her stories mixed up. After all, she did seem to be under stress lately, with the booking and incoming pay-per-view and all. Trish hurried along the hallway to the arena, occasionally passing by a familiar face and nodding her head in greeting. She sprinted towards the women's locker room, frantic that she had been tardy, especially with her important match against Lita scheduled later that night. She arrived nearly out of breath and having run so hard, and heard the other divas talking from the other side of the door. So loudly she wondered why she hadn't heard them when she was all the way on the other side of the arena. She shrugged and was about to walk inside and change into her in-ring gear when the topic of conversation suddenly caught her attention. Frowning and pausing with her hand midway to the door, Trish decided to wait a few minutes and eavesdrop on the conversation. "She should go with Mark." Lita's distinctive voice could be heard stating stubbornly. "It's obvious that he's a very caring person. If he was concerned for Patricia's well-being after only meeting her a few hours earlier and exchanging less than 100 words with her." "Yes, but what about Matthew?" Molly debated. "She just can't break his heart and chase after some guy she barely knows." "She knows enough about Mark to tell that he's really a sweet guy," Stacy pointed out. "That doesn't mean the two of them would work out as a couple, especially when they're going to be on the road at all times, at different times," Tori argued. "I think she should forget about Mark and try to work things out with Matthew. At least with him, she has a chance for a more normal life of the 2 possible relationships." "Oh, what do you know about marrying a wrestler? So of course you're going to be pushing Matthew in the WWF superstar," Leah spoke up dismissively. "Okay, if some of you think that Patricia should go with Mark because he's a sweet guy and it seems to care for her, at least he's a casual friend," Trish could hear Stephanie say. McMahon say, that's how you start the next sentence, but okay, whatever. Or saying that she should try to work things out with Matthew because she doesn't know whether or not Mark's even interested in her. And even if she were, the relationship would never work out because they're apart too often. A stretch of silence followed, during which Trish assumed that the other divas were nodding along with Stephanie's words. Her eyes began to narrow as a number of rather familiar details about Stephanie's story began to emerge, and it wasn't long before Trish had to put 2 and 2 together and realize just exactly what the billion-dollar princess was trying to do. Outraged, Trish prepared to burst in and confront the head of the booking department, but just then Stephanie uttered some words that shot the fury right out of Trish. "But let's just say that Patricia and Matthew live in a completely different state," she began. While the other side, Trish was ready to storm and request a private meeting with Stephanie. However, Mark, on the other hand, lives not only in the same state, but also in the same city as Patricia. "Oh," Tori and Molly echoed in the same time, with Trish outside the women's locker room, froze in her action as realization dawned upon her. "Oh my God," she thought silently to herself. "Is Stephanie saying that Scott Stapp also lives in Orlando, Florida?" Trish thought about the parking lot Monday night, where Stephanie had assured her that once the backlash was over and Creed had finished their first and only performance with the WWF, she would never have to worry about Scott Stapp again, and could instead focus on healing her relationship with Matt. Never have to worry about Scott Stapp after Backlash. Yeah, right, Trish thought to herself bitterly. In that case, Patricia would probably consider whether a relationship with Mark could be pursued. Tori's voice sounded tinny and hollow for some reason, and Trish barely registered that the pretty blonde's words were in fact the truth. Well, she should probably get to know Mark better before she ever thinks about dumping Matthew and chasing after some rock star. Molly spoke up reasonably. Trish could take it no more. On an impulse, she burst into the locker room, startling the other divas and nearly sending Stephanie McMahon rocking right through the ceiling. Trish! Stephanie looked guilty, like a young child who had been caught red-handed with her hand in the cookie jar. What are you doing here? End of chapter 3.